If you don't use your muscles, they weaken. Your brain also stays in better shape when you exercise. And not just challenging your mind by learning a new language, doing crosswords, or taking on other intellectually stimulating tasks. Researchers are finding that physical exercise is critical to vigorous brain health. The idea of exercising cognitive machinery by performing mentally demanding activities is called the use it or lose it hypothesis. But dozens of studies show that maintaining a mental edge requires more than that. Other things, including regular exercise, staying socially engaged, and even having a positive attitude, have a meaningful influence on cognitive functioning as people age. Further, the older brain is more plastic than is commonly known. The stereotype that old dogs can't learn new tricks is outdated. Although older people generally take longer to learn new pursuits and cannot reach the peaks of expertise that they might have achieved if they had started at a younger age, they can dramatically improve their cognitive performance through practice. As John Adams, the second U.S. president, put it, "Old minds are like old horses. You must exercise them if you wish to keep them in working order." The news comes at a propitious time. The proportion of older adults in the U.S. and in other industrial nations is growing as life expectancy improves. In 1900, 4.1% of U.S. citizens were older than 65. By the year 2000, that had jumped to 12.6%. By 2030, an estimated 20% of us will be in that category. Maintaining optimal cognitive functioning promises to enhance our quality of life through the years. How to keep minds keen over an entire lifespan is a question philosophers have posed since the earliest writings on record. As Roman orator Cicero put it, "It is exercise alone that supports the spirits and keeps the mind in vigor." Modern research in this field began in the 1970s and 1980s with studies that demonstrated that healthy older adults can improve performance to a greater extent than had been previously assumed. The earlier research did not fully address certain questions, such as how long adults could retain the new skills they had acquired through training, whether those specific skills would also improve other areas of cognition needed in everyday life, and whether the studies done with small numbers of subjects would be broadly applicable. Recent research suggests that cognitive training can lead to substantial benefits for older adults on the tasks trained, and some of these benefits are maintained over time and may transfer to other tasks. Toward the end of the 20th century, the National Institute on Aging funded a consortium of researchers to conduct a large-scale training study in a sample of older Americans. In 2002, psychologist Carleen Ball of the University of Alabama at Birmingham and her colleagues published results on more than 2,500 participants older than 65 who had received about 10 sessions of cognitive training. They were randomly assigned either to a cognitive process training group to learn how to excel in one of three areas: memory, reasoning, or visual search, or to a control group of subjects who did not receive training. At a follow-up 2 years later, the team randomly selected a set of the initial participants for booster training prior to evaluation. The results showed strong training effect sizes in each group as compared with the controls. In retests 5 years later, measurable training benefits were still present. More impressive, however, are recent training studies that focus on what psychologists call working memory and executive functions, how people plan a strategic approach to a task, control what they pay attention to, and how they manage the mind in the process. Psychologist Chandra Malika Basak, then at the University of Illinois, and her colleagues showed that training in a real-time strategy video game that demands planning and executive control not only improved gaming performance, but also enhanced performance on other tasks measuring aspects of executive control. Some studies have also increased the amount of practice provided. For instance, Florian Schmiedeck and Ulman Lindenberger of the Max Planck Institute for Human Development in Berlin and Martin Löfden of the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm asked 101 younger and 103 older adults to practice 12 different tasks for 100 days. Both younger and older adults showed general improvements in working memory. You do not have to have specialized training, however, to achieve cognitive gains or ward off cognitive decline. Everyday activities such as reading can help. We reviewed evidence on activity-related cognitive enrichment in more than a dozen studies. Robert S. Wilson and his colleagues at Rush University Medical Center in Chicago recruited more than 4,000 elderly residents from a geographically defined community and rated their frequency of participation in 7 cognitive activities, such as reading magazines. At 3-year intervals for an average of nearly 6 years, participants completed an in-home interview that included brief tests of cognitive function. More frequent cognitive activity at the outset was associated with a reduced rate of cognitive decline over time. Over the past decades, several studies have underscored the link between physical activity and cognition. For instance, neuropsychiatrist Christine Yaffe of the University of California, San Francisco, and her colleagues recruited 5,925 women older than 65 at 4 different medical centers across the U.S. The researchers assessed their physical activity by asking the women how many city blocks they walked and how many flights of stairs they climbed daily, and gave them a questionnaire to fill out about their levels of participation in 33 different physical activities. After 6 to 8 years, the researchers assessed the women's level of cognitive function. The most active women had a 30% lower risk of cognitive decline. Interestingly, walking distance was related to cognition, but walking speed was not. It seems that even moderate levels of physical activity can serve to limit declines in cognition. Moderate movement is good, but toning your circulatory system with aerobic exercise may be the real key to brain fitness. In a study of 1,192 healthy 70 to 79-year-olds, cognitive neuroscientist Marilyn Albert of Johns Hopkins University and her colleagues measured cognition with a battery of tests of language, verbal memory, nonverbal memory, conceptualization, and visuospatial ability. They found that the best predictors of cognitive change over a 2-year period included strenuous activity and peak lung flow. A study by epidemiologist Jennifer Weava, then at Harvard University, and her colleagues examined the relationship between physical activity and cognitive change over a 2-year period in 16,466 nurses who were older than 70. Participants logged how much time they spent per week in a variety of physical activities, such as running, jogging, walking, hiking, racket sports, swimming, bicycling, aerobic dance, over the past year, and provided self-reports of walking pace in minutes per mile. Weava's group observed a significant relation between energy expended in physical activities and cognition across a large set of cognitive measures. Most research thus far has examined mental performance over relatively short periods of just several years. A few studies have begun to look at what happens over longer timescales. Suvi Rovio, now at the University of Turku in Finland, and her colleagues examined the relationship between physical activity at middle age and the risk of dementia an average of 21 years later, when the cohort was between 65 and 79 years of age. Subjects indicated how often they participated in leisure time physical activities that lasted at least 20 to 30 minutes and caused breathlessness and sweating. Conducting such activity at midlife at least twice a week was associated with a reduced risk of dementia in later life. Indeed, participants in the more active group had 52% lower odds of having dementia than the more sedentary group did. Kirk Erickson and his colleagues at the University of Pittsburgh assessed self-reported physical activity alongside measures of regional brain volume. They reported an association between walking and retention of brain volume, which in turn predicted a reduced risk of dementia in 299 older adults over a period of 13 years. Interestingly, it is not just aerobic forms of physical activity, such as walking, jogging, swimming, and bicycling, that have been associated with improvements in cognition. Teresa Lou Ambrose, a professor of physical therapy at the University of British Columbia, found that resistance exercise improved aspects of executive control in older women. Why would physical activity have such an effect on mental abilities? It may have to do with the link between physical activity and disease. Physical activity reduces the risk of cardiovascular-related death, type 2 diabetes, colon and breast cancer, and osteoporosis. Cardiovascular disease and diabetes in particular have been associated with compromised cognition, so exercise could maintain cognition by reducing the risk of diseases associated with cognitive decline. Psychologist Stanley J. Colcomb, then at the University of Illinois, and his colleagues examined the influence of fitness training on potential changes in brain structure. The 6-month trial included 59 healthy but sedentary volunteers, aged 60 to 79. Brain scans after fitness training showed that even relatively short exercise interventions can begin to restore some of the losses in brain volume associated with normal aging. Kirk Erickson and his colleagues found that an hour a day for 3 days a week over the course of a year increased the volume of the hippocampus in older adults, which is a part of the brain that is crucial for memory. Researchers have found that brain regions that need to communicate with one another to support memory, reasoning, and problem solving become more poorly connected as we age. A study by Michelle Voss of the University of Illinois and her colleagues found that when older adults participated in a 6-month walking program, connections increased in a number of brain networks, and this increased connectivity was associated with improvements in executive control processes such as scheduling, planning, dealing with ambiguity, and working memory. Together, all these studies suggest cognition, brain structure, and function improve in response to improvements in fitness. Doing puzzles and push-ups are helpful for some, but other factors also boost mental fitness. Getting involved in social groups both improves cognition in general and seems to delay the onset of dementia. The traditional focus of this research has been on relatively objective measures of social isolation versus connectedness, including the extent to which a person participates in activities that prominently involve social interactions, such as doing volunteer work, the number of friends and relatives an individual communicates with regularly, or in other words, the size of a person's social network, and their marital status. Some findings suggest positive attitudes and beliefs improve adult cognition, but those results are spottier. Positive beliefs and attitudes may have indirect effects by influencing behaviors such as exercise and mentally stimulating activities that are associated with cognitive enrichment. More generally, people who are optimistic, agreeable, open to new experiences, conscientious, positively motivated, and goal-directed are more likely to age successfully, to take advantage of opportunities, to cope effectively with life circumstances, to effectively regulate emotional reactions to events, and to maintain a sense of well-being and life satisfaction in the face of challenge. Just as some activities may reduce the risk of cognitive decline, other patterns of behavior may increase the risk. Chronic psychological distress, resulting from depression, anxiety, and negative emotions such as anger and shame, is associated with a variety of negative outcomes in adulthood, including cognitive decline. The tendency to disproportionately experience psychological distress is called neuroticism. Studies have found a higher level of neuroticism to be linked to an increased risk of Alzheimer's disease and mild cognitive impairment in old age. Public policy should follow a health prevention model that takes this research into account. Supporting the elder hostel movement or adult continuing education could help older adults engage in intellectual activities. A critical issue is how to promote physical exercise and social interactions in midlife during the working years. Future research should address whether work-related activity programs, such as the availability of exercise facilities at or near the workplace, foster an enriching lifestyle. Before we end, it is important to know that there is some controversy about the magnitude and durability of mental exercise outcomes. Companies are marketing computer games and other means of exercising the mind, often making strong claims about the effectiveness of expensive products, claims that have not been backed by actual scientific studies. Consumers should look for evidence demonstrating the benefits of such products, particularly with regard to everyday activities such as driving, memory, and decision-making, and be especially wary of bold or miraculous claims. we may soon discover the potential for maximizing human performance through cognitive enrichment. Advances in medical science have led to increased longevity through effective treatments for many illnesses that increase the risk of dementia. Similarly, we hope, advances in psychological science can improve the quality of life and show how behavioral interventions can help us all age successfully.